Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Content Ops and the Rise of Generative AI, the Fuel for Customer Experience Transformation. We're very happy to have you all here today. Hopefully everyone is just coming on now. My name is Felicia Newhouse. I'm the VP of Product Marketing here at Aprimo. And today I'm thrilled to introduce you to Aprimo's Chief Product Officer here, Kevin Souers. He'll be leading today's exciting session on generative AI trends and Aprimo's role in AI innovation as it announces its new ChatGPT integration. So before we get started, if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to just pop them in the question box below here. And second, please notice our AI guidebook in the handout section for your reading pleasure after the session. And lastly, if you can, please make sure you fill out our quick 3-question survey at the end of the webinar. So Kevin, what a wild ride it's been watching the proliferation of AI capabilities across the MarTech these past few months. It's been pretty crazy. We are truly watching history unfold before our eyes and witnessing a tipping point in human evolution. And while AI may not quite yet be playing out like some of our favorite sci-fi thrillers, I'm sure many of the business leaders joining our webinar today across a wide range of industries can relate to all the scrambling that's happening right now to really figure this all out. Business leaders are feeling excitement, but they're also feeling overwhelm and confusion. And while this complex disruption has opened up a lot of opportunities, it also poses a lot of concerns around content risk and brand safety as leaders optimize their customer experience and work to move fast enough to gain a competitive advantage on all the AI movement that's happening within their market. So unless your teams are moving fast and they're prepared for the changes and challenges ahead, you'll get left behind. So there's a lot happening right now. So Kevin, without further ado, I turn it over to you, and we look forward to hearing from you and diving into Aprimo's latest developments.
Thanks, Felicia. Yeah, it's been a wild 2023 so far. You know, we've been partners with Microsoft for a long time. We've been playing with OpenAI for quite a while, but we were not expecting, you know, the announcement. I don't think my Microsoft partner team was expecting the announcement on January 23rd of the $10 billion investment of Microsoft into OpenAI, and what that represented for us, and more importantly for our customers, is kind of the transition from bleeding edge, because we knew it would be impactful. We've been previewing, you know, these large language model and NLP powers to our customers for a while, saying it's coming. I don't think we were expecting that day. So somewhere around that announcement, my R&D team greatly shifted course, went heads down, because we knew this was going to be so critical for our customers. And I'm spending a lot of time talking to our customer executives, and I'll share some of that today, because this, you know, the people on this webinar, we're in the fulcrum, we're in the middle of it all. You know, this affects all engineering and all software and all functional teams, but it especially affects the people on this phone. Oh, sorry. What's interesting, and you know, you always start these webinars with stats, right? But I'm going to start with one that actually just came out last month and I found most interesting. So myself as a marketing technologist and my peers, obviously, we all see what's going on with AI, and I think that's reflected in the stat they show here. The interesting stat that they backed it up with at Forrester was that while a great number of global B2B marketing decision makers are recognizing what's happening here, it's a lot lower than I would have thought. And to be honest, it's a lot lower than the rest of the general business executive population, which is surprising, because like I said, and like we'll talk about today, this hits us the most. Why do I say that? And that it hits us the most, and why do I say it's such a big thing? You know, if you look back, and unfortunately I'm showing my age, but I lived through the late 90s, the explosion of e-commerce and online, and I lived through the introduction of the iPhone and all the app craze, and of course the explosion of social media, which ultimately was the explosion of digital marketing and omni-channel content, and that was the last really huge content explosion. This is right up there with that, if not more. And the reason I thought to myself over the last few months, why is this so big? And I kind of arrived at the conclusion, this checks 3 boxes that a lot of emerging technologies don't check. First, it checks the consumer box, right? My 75 15-year-old father is using ChatGPT, the consumer version. My 15-year-old son is doing the same. It hasn't changed our lives, but they use it, and they use it creatively, not just in the simple ways that everyone feared, like, hey, it's going to write my papers for me or write my emails for me, which it does, but that's not the magic, as we'll talk about today. What's interesting, it checks that consumer box, it also checks the enterprise box, and probably even checks it even more so than that does. But most importantly, and what sets this apart with those other huge trends that happened before, is it touches the human. And this, when I've had the pleasure of across disciplines introducing trained AI models to different functional units, and they see what it can do for their business. And the best example I can give is my CISO. We were buried on a bunch of InfoSec audits, SOC 2 audits, and all sorts of fun stuff going on earlier in Q1. And finally, I'm watching the team, deal with this crunch. And we had our CTO build him an embedded model, an AI model. We took all our past policies, procedures, and audit documents, et cetera. We trained a model, and literally we gave him 90% efficiency increase. And not all areas get it that big. He sits in an area where it's primed for that. But it was stunning when you saw the look on his face to say, wow, my job just changed. And that 90% capacity on that particular task, it isn't that, oh, great, we don't have to hire people or we can get rid of people. It's now he can do more strategic things. And that's what makes this so exciting. I say it hits us, Aprimo and the people on this phone, because I assume you're familiar with Aprimo. This is, a representative. I'm not going to get into the details of Aprimo, but this is, as the world's leading DAM, content operations platform, work management platform, all in one. It pretty much nails us right in the core, because generative AI is all about content. And I assume that's why you're on the webinar today, because you're all on roles where it hits you as well. The reality of where we are is, and it's funny, again, when people say, oh my gosh, it writes things, it does things, it creates great emails. It's so basic that I barely can even think about that. It's how does it take content and the associated data and either supplement that data, use that data, and actually start to plan out the next best option on the deployment of resources, on recommendations on how to bolster content portfolios, et cetera. That power is there, and it's there now. And for those customers that have invested heavily in more robust data structures, planning out their metadata, et cetera, they're in position to take advantage of that right away. For those customers that haven't, or those people in the industry that haven't, sorry, people who have spent that time, because the other folks are going to be able to catch up pretty quick, because the models will create, there's different levels of models than just ChatGPT. They'll be able to create all sorts of data, meta tagging, et cetera, to drive these models and drive these marketing engines. So I'm not going to get into the technical detail of that today, but just be aware y'all are sitting in the next big data revolution. And so I assume you're on this call because you're thinking, well, how does this affect me? How does it affect my company, the operation I run or that I'm part of? And again, all these press releases coming out from all these companies, look, we have ChatGPT, we have a bot that does this, we can do that. They're largely focused on content creation. And those are great use cases. But where this is going to go in the next year is far beyond content creation. I mean, the most immediate and obvious things as owners of content and creators of content is that you have content discovery, you get content insights. Again, I won't go deep into the details. Those customers and prospects that arrange executive briefing sessions with myself or our CEO, Eric Huddleston, we certainly go more deep into these topics, but it's not appropriate for this webinar. But understand there's a whole array of capabilities that are in the process of being unlocked in the industry, not just specific to Aprimo. But that raises the second set is a set of questions that you have to be asking yourself, right? As we're going to talk about in a few minutes, ecosystem interoperability, brand safety, in massive amount of scale. We're about to have massive scale again after going through it the last decade and a half, just by the nature of how AI models work. And I won't go into the detail, but those of you who invested into modular content and chunked up your content into modules, you're about to get a lot of reward for that effort. So, just the idea of modular content at scale is more valuable and more real than it's ever been. But the most immediate, and the reason I'm talking the most with customers, is we're on the cusp of right now as we speak. And that is, the reality is in 6 months, we've lived a world of content scarcity. We can't get time with the creative team to make content. We have to pay agencies for more and more content. In 6 months, every single one of your employees can be a content author. And I won't get into the details, but if you go check out what Adobe Firefly's got, they haven't released it all yet. Obviously, image stuff is got a ways to go. Or you look at what Microsoft Designer or Canva have already released, quite frankly, and what they're previewing is to come. Just understand that every one of your employees is fully equipped to be a content author. We've spent a lot of time the last 15 years. I've spent a lot of time giving them token-based, self-templating production capability. Quite frankly, that's all been immediately labeled as old tech. That doesn't hold a candle to these tools that are coming online. So that sounds exciting, but there's some real issues you're dealing with right now because your employees are using these tools today. And that is, many of your business users may think they can be content authors right now. And we'll talk about why that's a problem. But why do I say that? There's a site, you can check it out. We have no affiliation. I can't even say it's accredited, but it's futurepedia.io. And you can see here, they catalog all the AI tools available, updated daily. They have 2,500 AI tools categorized. And by the way, I went to the Wayback Machine on February 13th, 2023. There was 870 AI tools in Futurepedia. So that gives you an idea of the velocity of what's going on in terms of the consumer hype, in terms of the PE money flowing in. But quite frankly, the reason it's happening is because GPT is really easy to use. It is the most remarkable technology, and I've been doing R&D for 20 years, that I've ever seen in terms of delivering power without a lot of effort. Which is why everyone sees it and they say, oh my gosh, look at this technology does magic, let's create a company around it, and boom, all of a sudden you got 2,500 AI tools cataloged. But it's an interesting thing, and I wish I could take credit for this, and then actually it was a customer as we were talking, looking at Futurepedia, and he was a video guy, and so we went to the video category page, and we happened to be this. I don't know these 3 companies at all. So if anyone's from Shuffle or Nova AI, or know anyone there, tell them I'm using them as an example, and hopefully all publicity is good publicity. But if you look at Shuffle, the customer pointed out and said, hey, your users now can use any of these, and some of them are free, right? And he said, well, yeah, we'd probably want to steer them to an appropriate tool and decide and do the due diligence, because when I sell to customers, I have to go through InfoSec, I have to prove that I can store the content safely, all sorts of compliance hurdles, all necessary. But now your users can go procure technology anytime they want, grab your content and make their own. But the problem is, if you look at Shuffle, which appears to be good, KPMG uses it, Intel uses it, seems to be verified, whatever that means. You may think, that's the better one, let's choose that one. But you really got to dig in, right? Because Nova AI, for all you know, or for all you know, Shuffle, they're using your own content to train your models, thereby you're essentially giving your IP to the public. And you just don't know. And I'm not saying they're doing that, but that's the reality of what's happening right now. 2,500 tools available. So the question is, if that's happening right now, are you ready, right? You have 2,000 new AI tools that want to market directly to their employees, and they're telling them what will happen eventually. Some of them are horizontal, and I assume most of you know there's a difference between vanilla GPT and trained GPT, embedded model GPT, fine-tuned model GPT. We won't get into the details of that, but understand these tools will work better if they have your content to train their models. So they've got 2,000 tools hitting all your employees, and they want your content. But we just spent the last couple decades organizing all our content, centralizing our content, centralizing our processes, right? But we're now in a world where this giant universe of AI tools is going to start not only taking your content, decentralizing it at the discretion of the individual user that decides which content to use, but now they're going to start making new content from your company and you'll never see it. all they'll want from you, and I'm already getting the expense reports myself for my employees working in the labs, is they want your marketing dollars to pay for it all. And if people start signing up for these cheap tools, $20 a month, $30 a month, and they're signing up for 5 different ones, and it's all your employees, all of a sudden your marketing dollars are actually going to AI. And it's only going to get more. You're going to end up signing enterprise contracts. That will happen. You will have burned down. You will have to centralize this spend. But the reality, we've talked a lot the last few years about composability. Hey, bring together, don't use the monolithic stack, bring together best of breed, the integration barriers have lowered, so you can essentially compose the perfect platform for your MarTech stack. The reality is now with that composability and AI coming on, it's a cosmic collision. Because before we were just worried about stitching together all the marketing apps. Now we have 2,000 AI apps to stitch in. And all of them want the same thing, the content sitting in your dam. The dam is the fuel of the marketing AI engines that will be powering your company for years to come. So what do you do about that, right? A lot of focus, oh good, we can do generation. By the way, I'm not dismissive of generation. Aprimo is going to be delivering all sorts of generation tools. We'll talk about the first one we've already delivered in a moment. But there's so much more than, oh, look, I can use this to make a tweet. It's the massive amount of scale. It's the training and the prompting. That's going to be where the innovation is. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And that's why these applications want your content. It's about the composability. But most importantly, especially in the near term, it's about the brand safety and the governance, right? We've spent a lot of time centralizing this, controlling the brand, protecting compliance. And now all of a sudden it's Wild West again. I got content flying all over the place. What did I just spend the last decade doing? So there's different ways to look at it. And I'm going to look at it the way I like to look at it, which is these are quite frankly the headers of the Aprimo strategic roadmap right now. And again, there's entries under there and more detail available. And if you're an Aprimo customer prospect, certainly I encourage you to arrange the executive session with myself or the CEO. And we'll go way into detail on where we're building on this. But the first column is probably the one most of you are familiar with, AI-driven productivity. And you know what? These delight end users. The ability, we're going to make it so the transcription of videos that we already do with AI will be summarized automatically into abstracts. We'll take in creative briefs and we'll automatically create content plans that show the, potential initial drafts to give that guidance to people. And by the way, the one thing about Aprimo you always hear us say is we're never looking to replace people with AI, ever, ever, ever. We believe in human review. We believe in human oversight. We believe that AI's power is in enabling the people. We've been doing this from 2017, so we know that if AI is 99% correct, that's not acceptable, right? You have to be perfect, and AI will never be perfect, and so you need to balance your productivity features, the idea that I can use AI to do all these amazing things, with some kind of control, selective audit, governance, etc. But the reality, it's there, right? The AI-driven productivity will be coming from us. It will be coming from all your software tools. It already is. And people will have much more capacity, efficiency, because they're working on higher-end tasks. And I think we all understand that. What we're spending a lot of energy on, and we'll have that drumbeat going on the productivity features, but we're spending a lot of energy saying, what does this mean to the composable stack? What does this mean to governance? What does this mean for true innovative transformation, which without a doubt, whether Aprimo drives it or someone else drives it, there is innovative transformation. We're on the eve of another huge revolution. Those that have been in the industry a couple decades can point to those seminal moments I mentioned earlier in the presentation and think back to the revolution that occurred after the introduction of those technologies. That's where we are right now. And that's where we spend a lot of time talking with our customers about. Governance, you're getting back to the good old-fashioned management of spend, smart workflows, automatic hookouts to third-party, apologize for background noise, downtown Chicago comes with some fire truck risk. You have to automatically have integrated processes that know when to call out to third-party AI systems. It's just, there's an entire stack reconstruction that every single person on this phone is going to go through, whether it's this year, next year, the year after, and quite frankly the timing of it and how fast certain companies do it or don't do it probably is going to determine the winners and losers in the next marketing revolution. So obviously we're here talking to our customers, to our prospects, to our interested stakeholders and saying, do it now, start now. You don't have to revolutionize, but you got to do something, because you, the people on this call, are uniquely, right? AI affects everyone, but it uniquely affects you because you hold the keys to the future ways of working. And that is that content that you spent so much time developing and putting through omni-channel and centralizing. It's more important than it ever has been, ever. The entire damn industry, the entire content operations industry is now got a spotlight on it and can be an engine for growth for our companies, for our customers, for your companies. So that's exciting, scary, but also exciting. And I think the winners are the ones who are going to seize this. And the losers are the ones who are going to say, quite frankly, yeah, I'm going to wait and see. But even, we released our first AI feature. It's really important to us to be first. We have a history with Microsoft. We were first in 2017 with at scale, out of the box AI in the damn industry. Fairness to Adobe, they would probably say the same thing. I think we're within days of each other. But we've been at the forefront of AI. We partnered with Microsoft in 2017 to get their new services to market, and we're partnering with them again. So we got to the front of the line with that partnership. We were able to get our Azure licenses early. It was important to us to do it via Azure because of the compliance, because of GDPR, because we had signed agreements with our different InfoSec organizations that had audited us, that we keep things within boundaries. And so we did wait a little longer to get those Microsoft licenses because it was important to us to do this the right way, not just to slap something out there. We wanted to release, we didn't want to preview a beta feature. We wanted to give something to all our customers. And this feature, which is pretty straightforward, right? You can have automated prompts to optimize any language, and then, clean up any text content in the application. I don't mean to be dismissive of it, but it's pretty straightforward with GPT to do this. It's the productization, it's the safety that is the hard part. And that's why my favorite bullet on the screen is probably none of our salespeople talk about it, but I love it. It's a hint to where the future is going. And the most important bullet on the screen is this third one, and it's that we clearly flag all content that is AI and influence. Maybe you care about that, maybe you don't. Maybe you'll care about it in 6 months and you'll be really happy you have it. Whether you want to report on it, whether you want to put it through secondary review processes, you need to at least know which content in your portfolio has been AI influenced. And that's all well and good when we do it within Aprimo. But what Aprimo is also focused on is how do we be your infrastructure to centralize the spend, to centralize your models so that every single AI tool that you use in the future doesn't need to recreate your models, so that you have central control not only of the content that trains the models, but the basic models themselves, which can be extended through fine-tuning various point-specific vendors that service specific needs. But that is the spirit of composability. I just described the composable stack, except now it's not just MarTech applications, it's going to be the AI and composable stack. So again, when you think about this feature, think most about how this is a look at the future. So what can you do? I just told you everything we're doing and what we think you should be thinking about, and that's a little bit overwhelming. So we made some guidebooks for our customers and our prospects, and I'll share some highlights of this, and I'll share links to the guidebooks, and this will be an ongoing series. I think we've published 3 parts, and the 4th part's coming any day now. But you right now, I don't pretend that you're going to go out and now have 1 million AI tools and everyone's going to get 90% productivity increase, and I'm selling you a magic pill that says, look, I'm AI enabled, and we can just go out and use our capacity savings to have more happy hours. You got a journey ahead of you. It's not that easy because the technology may be easy, but the governance around it is very, very complex. So start developing your centralized company point of view. Where can you use this? How can legal use this? How can your InfoSec use this? Obviously, how can your marketers use this? Obviously, how can your agencies use this? You need to start centralizing that point of view, because that is going to be, it sounds simple, but that's going to be your roadmap for future decisions that you're going to make in terms of evolving your stack. Along with that, what are your policy considerations? You know, it's funny, I talk to mid-market customers and I talk to enterprise customers. Enterprise customers that kind of get it, and after the talk, they tend to gravitate toward, oh my gosh, I have 500 employees and they're all content authors. How do I get this under control? Quite frankly, a lot of the mid-market, and mid-market should be really excited about this, and guess what, enterprise are coming for you. You use this stuff right, you stitch together the right tools, you put it together in the right infrastructure, and that's what we're looking to build for these customers. They can now fight above their playing weight. They now can do what with 5 people, what big companies used to do with 20 people. And it's really exciting. Decide where you stand. Is it the governance, or is it the efficiency and capability that you look forward to the most or fear the most, and develop your use policies around that? Because you know what, in the absence of that use policy, your employees are using whatever tool they want right now. How are you going to pay for all this? It's small right now. And by the way, the AI companies are obviously selling it relatively inexpensive compared to where they're going to end up. But even then, it's one of the most expensive services I've ever integrated into a platform. So start thinking, how are we going to manage the budget on this? Because you're going to probably have your enterprise, you're probably going to have a 7-figure AI budget within 18 months. How are you going to track it? How are you going to pay for it? And what we're looking to do for Aprimo customers is hook up those commitments through the Aprimo platform so you can burn down your commitments via Aprimo. Again, all future stuff. If you get through that basic stuff, you can start kind of graduating in the next stage. Prompt management. I have this content. How do I want to access it? How can it be used for good? How can it be used for bad? What content is good? What content is bad? It's interesting, when we started using AI for InfoSec, I reviewed 100% of what it produced because I wanted to get a sense of it myself. And very quickly, I recognized, hey, if it's giving a good answer, you can almost eyeball it, and it means you probably have pretty good content. If it's given a bad answer, it's usually not because the AI is bad or stupid. It's usually a great indicator that our content in that area is bad. So there's a reverse use case that's really interesting. So start thinking about what makes good or bad so that you can recognize if your AI models are performing right, and potentially use the metadata and the various types of data that you have in your system to do automated prompting side by side with your individual users, so you can make sure they're getting the best use of the big data that you have, i.e. your content. And then, again, this isn't tomorrow, but you need to start thinking about what is the most valuable content I have? What is the 93 octane content that I want to drive the marketing models that are going to drive my organization in the coming years? Quite frankly, the coming year, because all of this will be here pretty quickly. It already is moving fast. So these are the foundational things you can do. I would say for those, by the way, I know we're at the end in a minute. I will stay on for questions. But for those that want to, you can go to our webpage to get our generative AI guidebook. For those of you that are Aprimo customers, you get access to a Aprimo community, which has an even deeper dive into all of these topics. But certainly do so. And certainly if you are with Aprimo right now, either as a customer or a prospect, I encourage you to work with your account representative to kind of get a deeper one-on-one dive on these topics with myself or with our CEO, Eric, because we feel this is so important that we ourselves are going on this road trip, because we do believe this is a seminal moment in the careers of probably most every single person on this phone. That, Felicia, I will open it up to questions.
Great, thanks, Kevin. That was fantastic. And yeah, I know we're running over time here, but we're going to get through as many questions as we can. And if we can't answer them, we are definitely going to follow up with you and make sure we get you some great answers back. So just switching over to questions here. One of the first questions in was, how should we be preparing our content in Aprimo today to get ready for trained AI?
Yeah, in Aprimo specifically, I'm going to speak in general.
Yes.
To get ready for trained AI, as I said in the webinar, you should be identifying your high octane content that has, because you can train models with a low level of content. Remember, I said the tech barrier to entry is low here. You can train embedded models on 10 pieces of content as low as probably technically 1 or 2. Start identifying what is that prime content that is critical. However, when I say models, and this is where a deeper dive is kind of better, it's not going to be one model. You might have models formed, we might, we're going to form these models for our customers automatically, first of all, and you might have a collection in the dam, and you're collaborating with a few people to get a campaign out or to plan a campaign, and you may want it to be about a very specific topic. At that moment, you can pull in, if we do what we're planning to do in the next few months, whether it's Aprimo or otherwise, you can pull in content together and have a model quickly spun up automatically, and then use ChatGPT interface just like you do on the consumer version, except you're hitting it with controlled prompts but more importantly, the outputs reflect the content that you brought together to train the model. And that's kind of the power there. I know that sounds a little confusing for those that aren't close to it, but the idea that you could just ad hoc get 5 people together and choose 5 pieces of content that reflect what you're trying to achieve in this next campaign, and get together with GPT and the 4 colleagues and use it interactively to plan out initial drafts, initial sequencing, initial plans of a campaign, for example, that's amazingly powerful. Your legal team, they're probably going to use it in different ways and choose different sets of content and have their own model focused on more technical aspects or legal aspects.
Great. And following up on that, is it on the roadmap to put guardrails on Aprimo's ChatGPT feature so that we can use our own content to generate responses, new content? We'd like to shut out the noise and hallucinations, is what this person's asking.
Exactly. You just nailed, yes. We have an approach, and I don't know, this is a new field. So we developed the approach. Obviously, we're heavy in the communities, sharing ideas behind the scenes. But that's exactly it. You can't be using vanilla GPT, right? I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. When I talk about models and embedded models, vanilla GPT is cool and it's fun right now. And it's great for my 75-year-old dad and my 15-year-old son. Vanilla GPT, while good and helpful, isn't systematically enterprise quality or business quality for a specific company, or it can be, but it could be so much better. The embedded models and what we're going to do for our customers in terms of giving them the ability, because we have the content. That's the amazing thing. That's why I say we are all on this phone in the middle of it all. We already have all the content all these AI tools want. And so the key is to make sure we keep that content in place and that we power the models, because vanilla GPT is at best 50% of the power versus an embedded model specific to the task and activity in your content and your company goals and your brand voice. That's the magic.
Yep. And so following up on that, if we turn on the ChatGPT feature, there's no risk that their content becomes part of the collective. So just
that's why we go through Azure. OpenAI claims the same, but of course we've all read about Samsung accidentally releasing IP, but that was on the coding side. That's where we know Microsoft. I put one of the first applications on Azure over a decade ago, and Microsoft's very careful about ethical use. This is a multi-trillion-dollar company that sells to enterprises. They're not going to let your content get out in the open. And yes, the current implementation we have is using vanilla GPT, but I'm going to tell you that it'll probably be one of the last vanilla GPT things we implement. For that, quite frankly, I'll be just transparent. It was important for us to be the first dam in the industry to have it.
Yeah. So next one, a simple example, the category manager has an offer broken into its core offer elements. For example, product equals Coke, size equals 2-liter bottle, offer quantity 2, price $2.99. Can we train it to come up with the exact text that should appear on the POP? So yes, I would assume that that can be solved through prompt management and training, right, Kevin?
It's just, absolutely. You probably could, you could actually put that into a prompt in the consumer ChatGPT and probably get a pretty good first cut. I never recommend copying and pasting anything it does. It's still your voice, right? I'll tell you right now, I've read a ton of it. And it's funny, Chuck Cahoon, the analyst for Forrester, told me this back in January when we were talking about it, and I didn't believe him. He said, you know, everyone's working on AI detection, et cetera. How can I tell? The human brain's still undefeated, right? The reason I'm so passionate about AI is its ability to free the human brain to do higher things. And Chuck said to me, I bet you in 2-3 months, maybe a year, we'll be able with our own eye to spot AI generated content. And obviously I'm a little ahead because I spend a lot of time with it, but I know when it's GPT generated, which is why it's important not to use a vanilla GPT and put your own stamp on it. But you know, our CEO, Eric Huddleston, likes to say, and he did so in a very elegant LinkedIn post a couple of weeks ago, content is the new programmatic. Because sometimes AI generated content is just fine, it's good enough, right? Just like sometimes programmatic ads were good enough. It's going to be picking and choosing your spots, but certainly doing so consciously and with transparency and visibility and governance, and not doing it wild, wild west where a digital marketer can just roll their own.
Yep. And so another question/comment, we have a fashion client that with 40 hours investment now gets translation and descriptions with 80% accuracy. So this saves them from around 24,000 hours of work a year. So yes, this shows the great power of what can be better automated with new AI technologies that Aprimo is investing in providing solutions for, I'm assuming, right?
Right. So it is a great example. I'm so glad whoever asked that question because it's a great setup. You heard me mention the composability in the ecosystem. Aprimo is going to have plenty of AI productivity features because that delights end users and makes them happy. Aprimo will have great innovation with the centralized models and centralized prompt management to the extent customers want to use it based on their own data and their own brand voice. But Aprimo's not, you know, translation's an interesting one because, you know, we could do it, right? The 40 hours probably includes learning time, quite frankly. That doesn't surprise me at all. But what Aprimo has to decide for us, and by the way, every technology has to decide, is what do you build versus what do you embrace? It's the whole composability theory. If we try to build everything, we're diluting ourselves, right? There's just no way. And sorry, I don't know why my Teams is going. We need to embrace best of breed technology. So whatever they created for translation, and maybe Aprimo will probably end up doing some kind of translation, but we'll always want to do it with a little twist, like, hey, translate it, but make sure, do contextual translation to make sure it fits the same size box, right? That existed on the original asset. It's a little trickier than just straight translation, which is always a challenge on translation, is will it fit the same way in the asset? But we don't want to compete with their translation tool. We want to integrate with them. We want to have a natural flow where that tool is called via a logical workflow or ad hoc, and the input comes back so that all the content is still centralized, all the transparency is still there, but you're not some vendor, like a monolithic vendor that is trying to convince you that they can do absolutely everything. There's 2,500 tools. And some are specific to an industry. I was talking to someone in the arts and crafts industry, right? And they're probably going to need a fine-tuned model. Even if you tag it, they have stuff that looks like other things. There's probably an arts and crafts SME out there that in the next 2 years is going to build a fine-tuned model. And what we'd like to do is give them the ability just to plug their model into the Aprimo foundation so that we can orchestrate the ecosystem, because the governance and the control and the visibility and the centralization of content is more important than ever before.
Great. All right, we have one last question here because we know folks want to get back to their day here too. So what can we do today to manage the risk of generative AI in our orgs with Aprimo? What can we do to get started today?
Well, that's what the guidebooks are for. You know, again, I don't know if I'm still showing my screen, but I'm not gonna mess with that right now. Go to the blogs. There's a 3-part guidebook, about to be 4-part, probably 12-part by the end of the year, or maybe by the end of the summer. We spend a lot of time thinking about that and talking with our customers, and that's why we lay out reasonable approaches to get started. You can't go 0 to 100, right? Some customers are ahead of others. Some companies are ahead of others because they already have centralized content with strong metadata and taxonomies, which is just fuel bubbling, waiting to go. Others is a little more decentralized. Maybe they have a lighter weight dam that wasn't as heavy on taxonomy and data or work management. You just kind of have to take self-assessment, but it starts, quite frankly, with not a technology assessment. It starts with a company assessment. That's what I led with. Do the basics. Think to yourself, where is this going to impact? Who's going to need my content? What content are they going to need? What models are we going to want to build for them to do their jobs? I'll tell you right now, we challenged in our OKRs this quarter every single employee, including the office managers, to say, how is GPT going to change how I do my job? And the amount of innovation and stuff I never even thought of, like the human mind, again, it's undefeated, because the human mind is coming up with new ways to use what at the end of the day is a very powerful technology, but just a technology. And, you know, all of our product support is doing triage using it. Obviously, R&D is coding using it. Our legal department is using it, our InfoSec. It's just really fun. It's a fun time, but get started and do it centrally. Demand that departments talk about what they're going to do with it and start thinking about it and what content may they need, and then how can we centralize that and govern it? Because you should be producing AI generated content, right? Not for everything and not without human intervention, but to walk away from the kind of efficiency that fashion client walked away with, that's game changing. That is company performance changing, right? They don't have to spend 24,000 hours a year doing something that was low value add. Wow.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. That was fantastic. I mean, as we all know, this is changing our lives, our jobs, the industry. There's so much happening. And although we can't hit on everything today, obviously, this starts an important dialogue, I think, for business leaders and how they can start laying what's really a healthy foundation for generative AI and how they define it in their own org. So it's all moving at lightning speed. So we hope this was helpful to the folks out there. By the way, for everybody, again, on the guidebook that Kevin mentioned, go under the handout. So underneath the GoToWebinar, you'll see a little drop down that says resources. And we have a 3-part AI series that should be really helpful to you. It's quite extensive and comprehensive. So please make sure you download that and take a look at it.
The last thing I'll say is I do see a lot of situations where the frontline people or the people running the actual operations see the potential and their executives may not. And that's why we started the executive briefing series for executives, for Eric and I or myself to talk to your executives and to just have the same conversation a little more in depth, because especially if you're an Aprimo customer, we want you to win. We want you to win, and you're in a position to do so.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Thanks everybody for joining today and for your time, and we hope to follow up with more Q&A later.
Thank you.
Enjoy the week, everybody.